dig up that old fossil.
Going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
That's no moon.
We're all fine here now, thank you. How are you?
Welcome to the Star Wars Nerds Podcast. I'm Dan Vanabunker.
And I'm Kenton Larson.
It's been a week and a bit. How long has it been since FanQuest? Just over a week since FanQuest ended.
You've just had a little bit of a chance to recover from your... And by the way, if nobody knows, that's your big event that you plan, that we call DanQuest.
You're the only one who calls it that.
I call DanQuest, and a week ago you had it, and you were run off your feet.
Actually, it wasn't that bad.
Well, I remember you saying... I would actually like to enjoy FanQuest.
I did.
I remember you saying that. That was a very good line.
Yes.
I myself would like to enjoy this instead of have to run it.
I did both.
And you did both, yes.
I did manage to successfully do both, although I missed out on a lot of Kevin McDonald stuff on Sunday, which I regret. I wish I'd been more into his panels and stuff, but I had other stuff to do. I had to drive Ambush Vin, our friend Ambush Vin, Star Wars rapper. I had to drive him to the airport to catch his flight, which was delayed anyway, so it didn't even matter.
Shoot.
Of course. He's dropping him off. He's like, I hope this flight changes my opinion of United. He's flown United on the way back there.
Yeah.
And it didn't. Because he got in there and he found out that it was delayed and they had to put him up overnight in the hotel.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Oh, my God. So really delayed.
Yes. Yeah, so he could have stayed there right till the end of the con, and I could have seen the Kevin McDonald stuff. But anyway.
Brother.
One of the highlights.
And I didn't meet him. I saw him. I have evidence of seeing him in person. He sat at the end. I think I was in the front row for Pablo, and he was
for his solo presentation.
Yeah, and when I looked right, I saw him coming in or sitting. I can't remember what it was, and I was like, after this, I'm going to go say hello. And he was already gone. So I never had the chance.
He had a great time. He was very mobile, moving around at the con, talking to a lot of people. He did a little freestyle on his. It was a rap on the atrium speaker, so he did for the whole con, and then he did a performance in the theater as well. And the highlight for me, I mean, obviously a lot of it was about Star Wars for me because of Pablo being here, Pablo Hidalgo from Lucasfilm. Great moments with him, including the awards ceremony that we briefly talked about last episode when we had him on, but the college, of course, where we work and where we record this podcast and where FanQuest was held. Is the same college at which Pablo was a grad of our program, Creative Communications, and the college gave him a Distinguished Alumni Award, which is something they don't do all the time, and it just happened to work out that Pablo was coming here, so they gave it to him. And
I've been lobbying for that with an assignment that I give the students for, 12 years?
Yeah.
It's been many years that I've been using that assignment.
So now we have a real life scenario for which to base that assignment on. Say, listen, this is possible because Dan did it.
Yeah.
So you tell them that.
And Greedo showed up.
Greedo showed up. Very tall, skinny Greedo.
I wonder who that was. I even tagged him on that, and he didn't like it.
Oh. Anyway, he makes that's of course Chris Reed, our friend Chris Reed. He makes a very good Darth Maul as well.
Really?
Not Darth Maul. Sorry, rather Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren. He had a very customized lightsaber that he made. Like he did it, customized it to make it look like rough, like Kylo Ren's lightsaber is. So we had those were members of the 501st. The local 501st came in and marched in. We had a great looking Greedo, of course, is a member of that group, but also some really great Mandalorian armor come in, and one short stormtrooper, and it was great to have those guys come in and be a part of that ceremony. We gave Pablo the jersey. The Jetswing jersey, of course, it's a combination of Star Wars and the Winnipeg Jets, two of his favorite fandoms. He loved that. And so that during that moment, when I'm sitting there and he's giving his little speech about the acceptance speech for the award, that was one of my moments where I had, this is awesome. This is all worth it. Everything we did, regardless of the outcome of the event and how well it was attended, and it was okay. It was attended pretty well. But that was all worth it for me, and that was a great moment. The other great moment was when we got to sit down with Pablo in the podcast booth here, and I'm lucky because I got to do 2 podcasts both days, like 1 podcast per day at the end of the day. And Saturday did an episode of Super Pulp Science with Greg Kamichuk and Justin Curry and Lyndon and Steve, who launched their new comic book. And then on Sunday, we sat down with Pablo and we did a quick Star Wars Nerds. And the funny thing is, this all came out of a love of podcasting. This whole thing started when we went to C4 in like 2014, like 4 years ago, and we did live podcasting at the event. You remember that?
I do.
We shared a table with a bunch of other podcasters. We formed the Manitoba Podcast Network the now defunct Manitoba Podcast Network.
They wouldn't pay their dues.
Well,
those cheap bastards, and they probably won't pay for their hosting either. That's right. Where did the podcast go?
No, I don't know.
That's where it went.
So anyway, we did that, and that led me to get involved with C4, which led me to kind of fall in love with organizing the events, which led me to start FanQuest after I left C4, and so this all came from podcasting. So really, my favorite thing to do at these events is to podcast.
Yeah.
And so we did 2 great episodes over the weekend, and it was a lot of fun, and it was a thrill having Pablo back on because so much has happened in the 3 years since he was on last. That we were able to kind of, it's too bad we didn't have more time with him, but we got a lot of stuff out of him while we had him.
Oh yeah, it was great, and I got a million questions that I always want to ask him, but I love that he reminded us. He reminds me every time, but I'm just so excited when I see it, and I just ask him every Star Wars question I've got. But really, what it comes down to, and he works for Lucasfilm, so if it hasn't been announced, it doesn't exist.
Right,
and that's something that I think a lot of podcasters could probably stand to remember, that if nothing, and even I thought that the Boba Fett movie was official, but he said, oh no, that's what Hollywood Reporter reported.
Oh, the story was that James Mangold had been assigned to direct it, and that was it. But Lucasfilm had actually not announced the film yet.
Right.
And so that's,
so that was a tip. It wasn't an official anything.
Yesterday there was this kind of tweet going around. I don't remember who originated it, but it was like, what is one question about your profession that nobody gets, or whatever. Remember, did you see that?
Oh, yeah, I've been seeing that.
So that kind of came around Twitter, and I saw Pablo respond to that, and his response was, if what you're seeing seems like news, it's probably been old news to us for a long time or something. Like whatever is making news today has been in development for a very long time, so it's not new. It's been well thought out, and that's what their strategy is to think everything out properly. And he took kind of a PR side to it, which I understand.
He has to.
Yes, that was his job. He worked for years. He worked in the PR department at Lucasfilm, so he knows what that's all about. So yeah, you keep asking him about future stuff, and he keeps kind of sidestepping your questions.
Although I was trying to do that. I mean, the first time was a joke when I asked him. When I said, if there was such a thing as these movies, then would they continue the Solo story? And sort of like an if, like a hypothetical, which I know nobody likes answering those, but I did it more as a joke than anything. But the second time, I was just geeking out when I asked him about the midi-chlorians film that George Lucas had been talking
that's
about.
Because that was something that George Lucas brought up, and
right, that's what I thought too.
That was like, that's not a real thing, so he can talk about that a little bit. And it's funny because when he went on CGOB, our radio station here in Winnipeg, the morning before FanQuest, our friend Brett McGarry asked him about that exact same thing, about the idea. The report at the time, the story was that they're scaling back the anthology films because of the failure of Solo or whatever. And I didn't realize this at the time as I went back and caught up on some of Brett's podcast episodes. He does a show called The Couch Potatoes, which is a great show about movies and TV. They had spent a whole segment on that story the week before, and I didn't know that because I hadn't listened to it, but I guess because he just talked about it on his podcast, he felt the need to ask Pablo about it on the morning show of the station, and Pablo had the same answer.
Yeah.
He's like, we're not responding to anything that hasn't been announced yet, and those have not been announced. And so that was, that seems fair.
Although he did. Okay, so I was going to say, I actually have my questions that I've written out for Pablo. And so my first question, which of course we couldn't get an answer to, is are the spin-off films on hold? On hold. And we don't know. And then the one I did ask him, will Obi-Wan or a Boba Fett film take place where Solo left off? And he was like, let me get this straight. You're asking me about 2 things that haven't been announced. And I was like, well, Boba Fett was. And he's like, no. Oh, no, it wasn't. And I was like, So there's that one. Is Lando in episode 9? Like, there's no way we'd get that. But I was like, that was a wish that we might find out. I asked him about the Lucas treatments. I'm curious to know, and I didn't ask him, but a yes or no answer would have been fine, and maybe I'll ask him next time. But has he read the Lucas treatments for what would have been the Lucas trilogy? Like, you don't have to tell us what's in them. Have you read them?
Yeah.
How great are the fans? How bad are the trolls? I was going to ask him.
I think we know the answers to that.
He sort of covered that a little bit. And I think that's really Let me see. Those are and the last one was when he came here. He came here a few years before Force Awakens, and he actually put the order of the films from his favorite to his not favorite when he was here, and that's when we found out that Pablo ranked Revenge of the Sith higher than Return of the Jedi.
Yes,
which was really interesting. I was gonna ask him. We ran out of time, but I was gonna ask him, do you have a new order now with the new films, or he would have to, but is there a new order that you would rank these films in?
Just based on conversations I had with him over the weekend and from other stuff I've seen of him, I would imagine that Rogue One would have made its way into that top three, maybe above Revenge of the Sith. Rogue One is certainly his favorite of the new films, and that's because he had some interesting experiences. He reported live from the set of Rogue One. It was the first time they were doing one of these standalone films, so there was some different world building involved, and that's really what he does, is world building, right? Like, he just fills in the details for all this stuff that the filmmaker doesn't necessarily think about, but they need it to make it seem like it's a more real world. I had some questions for him that I totally forgot about until I rewatched The Last Jedi this weekend. It's on Netflix now, of course, so I rewatched it over the weekend. And I really should have asked him about the decision to not write out Carrie Fisher in The Last Jedi. That's something, because he says he's happy to talk about the past films. That's the past film. So I would have really liked to heard his insight. They had a note, they didn't take it, and now they're kind of stuck with this issue about how to get Carrie Fisher out of the series, but at the same time give her a good send-off and be true to the character. So there's some issues there that I wish I'd asked him about for sure.
Well, yeah, and I've been hearing more and more people talking about that decision. Let's just say, you know how the Star Wars podcasters are at each other's throats these days, and you and I, we don't have a horse in this race. We just love Star Wars.
Well, and rewatching the film, by the way, I rewatched it, and it's funny how that brings something going to Netflix brings it back into the conversation, because nobody was talking about The Last Jedi last week, and all of a sudden it's back on Netflix, and everybody's watching it, which shows you again how many people are actually buying DVDs out there.
Yeah.
How many people are just going to wait for it to come to Netflix. But that rewatching the film, it reinforced my love of the movie. It really is a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the surprises, the twists, the turns. I don't even mind the Canto Bight stuff as much as I used to.
No.
I can see what the reason for it was, even though it's not the most engaging part of the film.
Yeah.
It's pretty dry and drags, but that's very common for like the middle of any movie. It's hard to keep things moving in that second act. So I think that was an attempt to do that. Anyway.
I would say I agree with you that The Last Jedi is a good movie that suffers from a few questionable decisions, including that what you're talking about, which is we know Carrie Fisher died in real life. That means it's just she cannot be, and we don't want the
CGI.
No, we don't want that.
And that was again.
So
but
why have Luke vanish?
They tried it in the Rogue One. I think that was an experiment. They did it with Tarkin. They did it with Leia to see if, I don't know if they were. I don't know how the timeline worked out, but obviously they weren't planning on anybody dying, but I think they're testing that technology out with the audience to see if they could get away with that, because then they could bring back old Obi-Wan if they want to bring back an Alec Guinness-looking Obi-Wan. They could have done that. They could have done all kinds of stuff with that technology, but it didn't play with the audiences. Everyone kind of saw it for what it was, and so they're not going to go down that road again.
Yes and no, because I know people who went to see the movie and then had no idea that Tarkin was.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I heard some
people
not
notice that.
But I think it's the world we live in, which is when we go see a movie now, we don't pay as close attention. We don't soak it in like we used to. I think it's just what I think it's that. I think it's when you watch a movie, it's passive, and maybe you're thinking about other stuff, like maybe some people are. But I definitely heard people who just did not realize. But however, Carrie Fisher at the end of Rogue One, I didn't really hear lots of people loving that. I think most people agreed that she should have kept her back to the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because that looked perfect.
Yeah,
it looked crazy perfect until
she turns the face and says hope. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and you sort of knew you could sort of see where they could have stopped it. And similarly with Tarkin, when you see his face reflected in the window,
that was fine.
Oh, if they just would have left it like that. Oh. That would have just been super cool. Maybe one shot of him at the end.
There was it's interesting because the one of the things I had Pablo sign when he was here was his short story in A Certain Point of View, which is a collection of 40 short stories that take place around the original movie. And it was to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the film, of course. And so Pablo wrote a short story about Tarkin. And it was about, and the funny thing is that it builds on the dynamic we see between Tarkin and Krennic in Rogue One, about how Tarkin has been basically kind of sitting there waiting for Krennic to finish the Death Star, and then he swoops in and takes all the credit for it. And that was kind of played out in this short story. It was really, really well done. A really good, I told Pablo, you should write more fiction. He said, I would love to if I had the time for it. But it was a really great little short story that kind of gave you more insight to that character, so you could see why they wanted Tarkin in the movie as that person. But yeah, the CGI doesn't work out, so they're going to stay away from that. The other issue with
although that technology will continue to get better, there's no doubt.
But it'll be used for, like, again, it works best when, I'm trying to think of some good examples. I mean, it looks pretty good in Ant-Man, the first Ant-Man movie with a young Michael Douglas. Maybe if it helps if the thing is, I don't know.
Even that looked questionable, I thought, and even the Robert Downey Jr. in Avengers it
Iron Man? No, it was the Civil War. He was young in Civil War. I think it helps if the actor is there to do the face capture. So what's his name as Tarkin? Who's Tarkin again?
Peter Cushing in the original.
He's no longer alive, so they couldn't have him act the scene, right? So they don't have the face capture. They just kind of are making an approximation. So maybe that helps, because it is better if the actor is actually there to do it. Anyway, if
they would have had that technology when they shot A New Hope, they would have done the full body scan of Peter Cushing, probably. Although there's a new figure, there's a Star Wars Black figure out, which I've not seen in real life, but I've seen a billion times on Instagram, and it looks just like him. So it almost looks like they did have a scan of him. It's so perfect.
Well, they can do a lot with technology these days, but they can't bring people back from the dead convincingly.
Well, no, and we don't. And with Carrie Fisher, okay, 1 second in A New Hope I can stomach, but an entire film with a CGI actor who we know has died in real life, it's just it's depressing.
Yeah, and I suspect that if I'd asked Pablo that question, he would have come up with, I think the Last Jedi is shot and edited as written. So that is how it was intended to end.
Right.
They obviously didn't know Carrie Fisher would pass away, but they wrote it with, and the reason,
but she did pass away a year before the movie came out.
Yeah, so they did have time to fix it. So
they did.
But I think they did it to honor her memory. It was her final performance. They didn't want to change it in any way. But I also think that, and it doesn't come across in the film on first viewing. I watched it this weekend and I caught it this time around. But I think that there's a part in the movie where they're in the base on Crate and they're like sending out their distress signal, and Leia's like, "Put my personal code on it. They'll come for Leia." And there was that kind of thing. I think that's why, because obviously they could have had her pass away as she was blown out into space during the attack earlier in the film, but they bring her back, and I think it's because they feel that the people will rally around Leia, although they don't. Nobody answers the distress call except for Luke, I guess, in a way. But there was like, our signal was received at several locations and no response. So nobody out there is willing to help out the resistance.
Where is Lando? I thought Lando was coming. I did. I was like, who else?
Although that moment where Luke walks in and you have that Luke and Leia conversation is amazing in that film. I love it.
Yeah, so I get shivers when you see him walk in with the cloak on, and everyone's like, hoo, 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 hoo. And even Poe, although it does serve to do one thing, which it makes the other characters seem lesser by comparison. That's the one negative thing that happens when Luke shows up.
Well, yeah.
Is you look at Poe and you're like, he's just a fanboy like me.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not a hero.
Someone pointed out to me on Twitter yesterday that they compared the moves that were, okay, so when Rey is like kind of sparring with a rock earlier in the film.
Oh, yes, I saw that.
So she's got these certain moves that she's doing, and she ends up cutting the rock in half. And if you look at the moves that Kylo Ren does at the end of the film against Luke, it's the exact same movements, finishing with the cutting Luke in half, which turns out to be the illusion of Luke.
Yeah.
So all those moves are exactly the same. Someone pointed that out, and it's kind of cool the way that all comes together. The Jedi training.
It's neat.
That Luke imparted onto both of them, I guess, although I don't know that he ever had a time to teach Rey that stuff, but it's like, I guess, instinctual. Anyway.
I still wished for one little thing in The Last Jedi, and that is Luke doesn't need to disappear there. He can just levitate back down onto the rock and look however we want him to look, and the outcome still might have been the same. He could still be on that island as Episode 9 starts. Now, maybe what they didn't want is for Luke to continue to be the hero for all time. Maybe
It's
they wanted
be
to take him out of the
torch,
equation.
Right.
Right.
Be like Rey has to take the mantle on, and she has. I think at the end of the film, she is the last Jedi, and she is passing on the knowledge because she has all the. And again, I'm still not sure how they got those books into the Millennium Falcon. Like she went into the tree and got them out. Or
It's certainly not done in any way that the audience really actively sees. I don't think.
No. But the presumption is that she went to the tree, took the books with her. Right. Or Luke snuck them in there, but he wouldn't have done that because he thought he was destroying them.
Then why have the scene?
Or Yoda did. Maybe Yoda did it.
And after Yoda says, "Page turners, they are not."
Why do they even matter?
So now she's going to be sitting. We're going to watch her in the next film be bored, as she's like, "Wow, Yoda, you were right. These are horrible." Told you I did. What is he going to do? Make lightning come down a second time? Burn him a second time? That's thread. I don't know. I don't know about that. Like, I think there's still. Well, ultimately, what I'm going to enjoy is when 9 comes out. We still haven't done our 8 commentary.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
But when episode 9 comes out, I think we'll be able to take a step back. It'll be fun to take a step back and kind of go, all right, what turned out to be just bad decision making in the film, and what were the threads that just really came together in episode 9 that really paid off?
Yes.
The books could be one of them. We don't even know. The books could play
the
a
other one could
huge role.
be is Benicio del Toro's character. Where I'm so convinced he's going to come back in episode 9 because why even have that segment to introduce that character if you're not going to bring him back in some respect? And it's going to be like, we can't trust him because he betrayed us, but then he turns out to be, because he seems like a good guy. He gives her the necklace back. He's not like, he's just in it for himself, and he's just got
He
this
needs
kind
to
of,
make a few bucks.
That's it. He's kind of like Lando in that way. He's kind of like the Lando of that film.
A rougher version.
But I really enjoyed the performance, and I like the character, and when he's like, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, but this is what I've done. So that whole attitude, I mean, I think that it's going to pay off somehow in the next film. But yeah, we haven't done our commentary. We'll probably do that closer to, I don't know when we'll do it. It's summertime now, so
it's the best time to be a teacher.
It is the best time to be a teacher.
Oh my God, is it a great time?
But
especially with the World Cup on. Oh, bring hither the teaching. It's the best.
I've not been watching the World Cup at all. I'm not even plugged into that. So
to me, it's every 4 years, and what's better than every 4 years sitting our ass down on a couch and having an excuse to not do anything.
Well,
for
I do
4
remember the
hours
last time the World Cup was on. We actually did. We did our first podcast at Carboni. Pizza. We did our first.
That was fun, actually.
It was very fun. Our first live on location episode, and it ended up being super loud. But again, it was great pizza and it was a good time. But that was during the World Cup.
That's right.
So it was 4 years ago that we did that.
We started, and actually, I don't know. Are we going to do a remote one this summer?
We will. Yeah, we'll find some time and go off and find a restaurant or a bar or something, have some beers.
Winnipeg personality Jimmy Mack, not the one, not to be confused with Rebel Force Radio's Jimmy Mack.
Oh, is there another Jimmy Mack?
No, there's two different Jimmy Macks who love Star Wars.
Oh no!
Oh my! Never shall they meet, or else the world will fold in upon itself. The time-space continuum will stop. But he wants to be in our podcast, and I said to him, and he was here at FanQuest.
Yes.
And and I bought from his partner owns Pop and I Collectibles, and I bought the Commander Rex Star Wars Black figure.
Oh, nice.
For $1 million because it's rare.
Is it really?
Oh yeah, it's rare. No, it wasn't $1 million, but I'm not going to tell you how much I paid. That's how much it was.
How rare is it though?
It's hard. I've never seen it other than there.
And it's Commander
and
Rex.
they had it at the back of some easy to find ones. So I was like, what the? I actually
Did they not know it was rare?
No, they did. That's why it was priced the way it was. I don't think I was in any danger of someone else paying what I paid for it. Let's just put it that way. So I bought it, and then Jimmy Mack was there, and he's like, I'd like to do your podcast. And when I told him that sometimes we go to the bar, he's like, ooh, then he seemed really interested in doing our podcast. So maybe we'll do one of those this summer.
And just as a preview, Jimmy is one of the so-called naysayers. He didn't like The Last Jedi. I don't know how he feels about Solo. I know his partner didn't like Solo.
Oh, interesting.
But he is one of those people who does, and it is like he'll have a great conversation about it. He's happy to argue about it for the conversation, but he's not. He was not a fan of The Last Jedi and the twist that it took. So, and we have yet to have somebody on this show that really has taken that stance, right?
Yeah, it's just different shades of liking it. Is sort of what we have.
And although Schiffman didn't like Solo, he still liked it okay. Like, it wasn't horrible, but
as a Star Wars fan, it would really have to be terrible for me to hate it. Like, it would have to just be.
Well, it would have to, again, I keep going back to this, it would have to be prequel level horrible.
But having rewatched Last Jedi, there are decisions there that bug me. For sure.
Yeah, it's the same in any film.
I still like it more than The Force Awakens. I do. But at the same time, It's like, what? Like, so, we're this close. Like, there's some, and it's not my own personal opinion. I think as a story, the plot would hold together better from a writing perspective if there's a couple different decisions. And so that, I think those are the kinds of discussions we'll have after 9 comes out, where we're kind of like, ooh, okay, like what never paid off at all. And what, like just the other day on a podcast, I heard somebody go, "What was Lor Santeca on Jakku in Force Awakens? What was he doing there anyway? Was he watching Rey like Obi-Wan Kenobi was watching over Luke?" Like, and it's true. There's still some big things that have happened that we're not really on the in terms of understanding.
Certainly when we talked to Pablo, and this came through both times we've had him on the podcast, he seems to be all about the storytelling opportunities. And he said before he hates when people like put Anakin on a planet for 3 months because then nothing else can happen to him for those 3 months. So they're very careful about inserting things and then not exploring them to leave them open for someone else. So I'm sure there either is a story in comic book form or maybe novel form about Lor Santeca and why he's on Jakku. Maybe they can't tell that story until the third movie, until we find out everything about Rey, until we find out whether or not Kylo Ren is telling the truth about her parents or blah, blah, blah. There's all that stuff happening as well. The one thing another thing I really wish I'd asked Pablo about is, what kind of questions do these directors come to you with, like Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams and even Gareth Edwards maybe? What kind of questions? Maybe Ron Howard, maybe Ron Howard comes to them with these questions about the world. Do they ask you? Because certainly it was more talked about when The Force Awakens came out, but J.J. was talking about being on the phone with Pablo like 3 times a day, asking questions about the world. So I'm sure that he's had conversations with all of the Star Wars directors up till now about what is and isn't possible, what the behavior would be, that kind of stuff.
Well, Ron Howard actually, and here's a we don't do recommendations on the Star Wars Nerds podcast, but here's one. And that is Ron Howard was on the Empire podcast, Empire Magazine, which is a delightful podcast. And I stand by every year with their best movies of the year, because Empire's best movies of the year are geek movies, and they're really good. And I always discover like some great new director as a result of their recommendations. But they had Ron Howard on there, and they said, "Hey, was it always Darth Maul in that hologram?" And he said, "No." And they start asking, "Oh, was Jabba the Hutt in the running?" And he goes, "Yes, Jabba the Hutt was in the running for that hologram."
In a lot of ways, it would make more sense.
Right. And then they go, "Was." So I can't remember who else. They asked like 3 or 4, and he's like, no, I don't think so. No. Like, no, I don't know. Maybe, but I didn't know about it. Like there's that kind of thing. And then one of them, I think, makes the comment like, "You must have been on the phone with Pablo Hidalgo," and clearly Ron Howard knows who Pablo Hidalgo is. Yeah. So there was that. There was an ever so. Oh, did my earphones just unplug, or did my? Oh, there it is. It was either my earphones unplugged or nobody heard what I said, and either way, it's okay. Yeah. So there was at least a very little hint that there's a billion questions for Pablo. So there's another one.
Yeah, and so I would have liked to know what kind of input he had. One of the cool things we learned about him when he was here for FanQuest is that he gets to name a ton of stuff. He gets to name so many things in like the speeder that Han is racing, and we can't really reveal some details of that talk because he wants to take it on the road, I guess. And
I took notes, and I don't as spoiler-free notes, but I was gonna say, did you buy the Solo book, Pablo Solo?
Yes, I did. Yes,
okay, I bought it too. And one of my favorite characters is this guy. Took a picture. Yeah. He's Corporal Charlou Greslin, who cannot afford tuition fees to study university. So he is with the Empire on Mimban in return for a military scholarship.
Right.
So I love that. And I tweeted it out, and I said, he's the avenging angel of Star Wars. Hollywood hooker by night, honor student by day.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that cracked me up. But Pablo names all of those guys. Yeah.
And the cool thing is, and I think I can reveal this part because it's pretty self-explanatory, but the deal with the dice, as far as the dice being in. Now, I could have sworn, and maybe I'm just thinking about deleted scenes, but I could have sworn there was a shot in The Force Awakens where Han hangs the dice up on the thing, but that was cut. So that was a deleted scene? It was a deleted scene from The Force Awakens. Okay. When they come and say, "Chewie, we're home," and he walks up to the cockpit, he sits there, and for a minute we see him go like, oh, this is awesome. I'm home back in my ship. And then there's a scene where he takes his gold dice out and he hangs them back up on the rearview mirror, so to speak. But it was cut from the scene. But he talked about Ryan Johnson seeing that prop and that. I guess he was seeing dailies from JJ's shoots or something. So Pablo talked about how Ryan Johnson saw the dice as JJ was recording it and then ran with it. And so the dice become a big part of The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
But because the scene was cut, and he refers to another one, I made a joke about Zuvio being a guy. He talked about the toy makers. A lot of the reasons why he names things is for the toy makers to make toys of all these things. But how a character can get cut, like Constable Zuvio, where he's not really in the movie at all, but yes, there's a figure for him. So all these things that Pablo is a part of, it's really cool as far as how he builds these these names. And a lot of it is from he inserts inside Canadian jokes in there and all kinds of fun stuff. The
Ipso Bay Trading Company, which he says he doesn't mind us talking about because no one else would get it anyway.
Exactly. Only Canadians get that joke.
Right. But to me, and I said to Pablo, the thing that he said, that my favorite quote, in terms of what has not been announced, there's a lot. And it's like, oh boy, like, woohoo. Wouldn't it be great to hear about all the stuff? Another question I was going to ask him is, what's the movie that you would like to see made but will never get made in a million years? Because I'll bet you Pablo has a favorite sort of side character or something that he would love to see become a movie, but I'll bet that he knows it would never happen. Well, like there's a million of
but
those.
I don't think he can really talk about it because it might.
Right?
Like, he was pretty non-committal when we had him on the first time when I talked about Wooher and the bartender at the cantina, and his side story as far as how he turned Greedo into a drink for Jabba the Hutt, which was a short story someone wrote at one point. And he's like, I don't think we'll ever make a movie about that, but it might happen at some point because Star Wars gets weird. He said he likes it when Star Wars gets weird. And that's another thing I liked about The Last Jedi is that now I'm watching it and I can see the weird. The Canto Bite is the weird. That is what that is meant to be. The Canto Bite is the weird part of Star Wars. That's what the cantina scene is. Like, it kind of sucks that we see this kind of formulaic way of depicting it. Although, to be fair, the opening shot in Canto Bite is this kind of swooping pan that goes forward. And it's actually, I think Pablo pointed out that it's actually reminiscent of a shot from Wings, from a very classic silent film called Wings, where the camera goes across all these tables in this restaurant. So that's very similar to that type of a shot. It's a great shot, but then we see what messes it up for me are the goofy, the leprechaun guy rolling in his coins and hitting BB-8 because he thinks he's a slot machine, and those little goofy jokes are a little too goofy for me. But the weirdness is good. And
don't forget the Lucky Charms guy.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the leprechaun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the leprechaun. Oh, right. The leprechaun. Sorry, I don't equate Lucky Charms guy with leprechaun.
Why not?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the problem. I took some notes though from Pablo's thing, and this is not by any means spoiler level material, anything. But just a couple of sides that Pablo mentioned. I love the fact he said, George Lucas, now that he's retired, he seems to enjoy Star Wars.
Right.
And it's like, isn't it true that, now that I'm like within, I can view my retirement like coming over the horizon. And it's like, boy, I'm really going to enjoy teaching when I don't have to anymore.
That's right.
And that's the kind of thing. And I think that's the same for George Lucas. But I love that. And I would love to know if Pablo knows anything about that weird midi-chlorians movie that or trilogy, I don't know, that George Lucas was talking about recently. The other thing that Pablo talked about was, and he talked about it on our podcast, was Kessel Run is like Frogger, which is great. That's a great way to describe it. The other thing that Pablo revealed is, one of the other things that he did is he wrote the translation of the lyrics, the song that's sung in the barge in Solo.
Yeah,
he translated the lyrics.
Dryden's barge, yes.
Yeah, so there were English lyrics.
And he wrote it in a different language. That's what. So he took
in
Huttese.
In Huttese.
Oh, Huttese.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, yeah. Which was again another shot of weird into Star Wars, like that shot where you have the gold-clad singer, then you have the guy in the jar singing. Like that was another. It's the weirdness of Star Wars. That's where you get that stuff. So that's another awesome part of that film. I really want to go see Solo again. I still haven't taken the kids to see it. So hopefully it's still in theaters and I can still go.
I want to see it again too. I've only seen it the once
Me too.
as well.
Yeah,
and
I know.
And I really did enjoy it. And I would like to see it again just to see, like, hey, I'd like to pick it apart a little. Like,
one thing I'm thinking, and there's been a lot of talk about the stupid, failure of Solo and blah, blah, blah. And I think that among the other issues of being too soon after The Last Jedi and some other issues around that film, the release of it, I really do think a big part of it was being released during the summer blockbuster season. I do think they should stick with a Christmas release. December is a great time to go see a Star Wars film. It could be a tradition. It seems to do really well there. We had too much other stuff going on. And by the way, I've actually been very good about seeing a lot of the summer movies. I saw Incredibles 2. I saw Deadpool 2.
Wow.
So I've seen. I'm going to try and keep it up. I'm not going to see the Jurassic World movie. That looks awful. But I'm going to try and see all the big summer blockbuster movies. Next week is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'm going to try and go see that because that looks like a lot of fun. And that's why I've only seen Solo once. It's because there's all these other movies happening that I want to see. My kids want to see, and really it's only Luke that wants to go see Solo. The other kids don't really want to see it. So Luke is the big Star Wars fan in my house, other than myself.
I would also say that quantity of Star Wars. I think lots of people go see a Star Wars movie in summer, but we had lots of Star Wars, and we've had so much that the specialness of a Star Wars movie, which used to be every 3 years,
right?
Like you can't help but dilute it. We even had that talk before they even made any of these movies.
Yeah, we anticipated that as being an issue, right? Yeah.
We knew that was going to happen. And 6 months later, another film, it's just, hey, they satisfied the appetite 6 months ago. And so to get another one, and a lot of people have said Marvel does it all the time. And it's like, yeah, but they're different heroes.
Different characters, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And Solo, I guess you could argue that that's what that is. I don't think it is, though. I think Solo is part and parcel of what we already know, and so it's a tougher sell.
And it's, again, because, and then maybe we could talk about how Rogue One didn't have any familiar characters from the original films, but yet Solo does. Solo talks about one of the main 3 characters in that film is Han Solo, so we're exploring that backstory. So it does seem more closely linked to the original films than Rogue One does, although Rogue One takes us right to the beginning of A New Hope. But there's no Leia, there's no Luke, there's no Han in those films.
Yeah.
And that's why that kind of stands alone better than Solo does, maybe.
Well, I also think that Rogue One benefited from the love for just Star Wars is back. Remember that Star Wars is back love?
That was still that happening.
And
that glow was still
that
going.
goodwill. And the other thing is Lucasfilm got us ready for one movie a year, start in December. Christmas, hey, here's your Christmas gift.
Yep.
And it got us used to that, and this is the first one that breaks that, and that's tough. It's a tough sell when you've got the habit-forming behavior. That's marketing, habit-forming behavior, and we don't have the habit-forming behavior for 6 months later to go.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The other podcasts all seem united in their agreement that it was the marketing that killed Solo.
Oh, I disagree. I thought the marketing was actually the right amount of marketing.
They didn't go crazy.
No, I worried that would be seen as the reason. So I think they're going to blame the marketing on that, but I thought it was just the right amount. We did not get overkill. We did not have a million products named after Star Wars in the grocery stores. We had some TV spots a few weeks beforehand. We had only 2 trailers, which I think is great. We don't need more than 2 trailers anymore, although these days we're going to get 4 probably for episode 9. So I thought the marketing was good, but yeah, I knew it would be blamed because they did not go as heavy as they usually do. But what are you going to do?
They did do a Super Bowl spot. That's not hiding. That's not hiding.
But again,
in the
that was
woods.
the first trailer. Yeah. That was 4 months before the release of the film.
We always said they were going to have a marketing problem with Rogue One.
Yes, right.
Because prequel was a dirty word, and because
is this not a saga film? I don't get it.
Yeah, how does this fit in?
But that was
where's Rey?
That was not an issue. It is more of an issue for Solo than it is for Rogue One.
Yeah, so
because people were confused about the timeline because of the Darth Maul thing.
Yeah, and I do think there are people who don't even realize that Solo came out. I do think there are those people, or even know, I didn't see any posters for Solo. I can say that. I mean, but I don't go to movie theaters very much.
No, I think they all had a poster. I saw one interesting tweet from somebody from Japan who took a photo of the Japanese poster.
Oh, yeah?
He said he was almost willing to go in there and listen to it in Japanese just to see it again. I thought that would be interesting. But yeah, it wasn't like you see these giant displays in movie theaters, these big cardboard displays. For most, including Star Wars, The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, Oh, there was one at the theater when we went, right? Wasn't there the one where you get to sit down beside Chewie or something?
You can't sit on it or you'll break. That's the irony of it. It looks like, hey, have a seat and take your picture, but you can't, or else the cardboard seat will break under you probably.
I saw the worst one of those displays in a theater for the film about the dogs with...
Isle of Dogs.
No. It was the bad one about the dogs with Will Arnett, and it's about a dog show. It came out like... Oh. It was like a nothing release. It was gone in a week, but there was a big issue around... Okay, so this is an aside, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So the big issue with the film is that they spend a large portion of the movie talking about... It's a children's movie with talking dogs in it. They spend a large portion of the movie talking about the handling of the dog's genitalia, because that's something that happens at dog shows, right?
Yeah.
So it was a weird thing that kept coming up in the movie. There's a lot of parents that were critical of it because it's kind of teaching kids that it's okay for people to do that. It was so weird. Anyway, I saw the laziest looking POP display for this film that I can't even remember the name of. And it was a big image of the film, like the poster, whatever it was, and then just cut a hole in it, a random hole, so you can stick your face through there. But it wasn't even lined up with anybody's body or anything.
Just stick your head here.
Just stick your head here, and that's it. Now, often they'll try and do something these days to make it interactive, like that Solo one, so people will take a photo and post it on Instagram and do a little bit of free marketing for the film.
Or the walrus at the zoo.
What's that one?
You stick your face through the little
seal.
It's a seal. Yeah, sorry.
So that kind of stuff, but they did not do that. This is just like, they took the big display and they just cut a hole in it and said, okay, stick your face in there, kids.
Oh, boy.
And it was very, very poorly done. So bad job, whatever that movie was.
Yeah,
so forgettable, and it's unfortunate that it stars Will Arnett because he's a phenomenal voice actor and comedic actor. So, it's just one of those paycheck movies for him, I guess.
I do think that if Solo, if all of the marketing materials for Solo, it was perfectly aligned with Donald Glover's massive hit music video,
right?
As well, and it's almost like they almost missed that in a weird way. Like it came out before the movie was released, and it had like tons of notoriety, but it's like it didn't seem to translate in any way. There seemed to be no halo effect on the movie.
I thought that was Donald Glover taking advantage of the film coming out. I think that was his. I was Childish Gambino,
right?
Jumping onto the Star Wars bandwagon, not the other way around. I thought that Star Wars could have done that, but they didn't. But I think he released it just because he knew he'd have a lot of new eyes on him because he's in a Star Wars film, which is not something he's ever done before, or an audience he'd never really interacted with before. So he released the video ahead of that to kind of let people know what he was all about. Mm-hmm. And Star Wars could have done that as well the other way, but they didn't. They didn't really jump on that at all.
Yeah.
And although he would be the one bringing in, as we said, the most kind of the newest fan base into the film would be Donald Glover and his fan base from his music career. Obviously, Woody Harrelson brought a lot to it, and Thandie Newton was pretty popular. Nobody knows who that other guy is, Alden Ehrenreich is, but anyway.
Maybe that was part of the issue too.
Yeah,
big stars weren't.
Again, they want to hold back because it's not Harrison Ford. That was always, we always kind of identified that as being an issue. But in the end, regardless of what they do plan to do with these standalone films, I'm okay. Like I have trust in what they're doing at Lucasfilm, and certainly knowing that Pablo is a part of it at a high level reassures me because he is such a nice guy. We spent the whole week with him. It was so cool. The coolest thing was like the family reunion happening at his table. Like his parents came in and just hung out with him at his table all weekend.
Talked to his dad a bit.
Yeah, me too. And I talked to his mom, and I got to see this very, very heartfelt kind of goodbye moment where he said goodbye to his parents.
Oh, you saw?
Yeah, I was right there because I was bringing him over to do our sorry to interrupt this. Can you come do our podcast, please? But no, I let them have their moment. But I did observe it, and because he was coming to do our podcast and heading back to the hotel and flying out the next day, so he wasn't going to see his parents again, and they're very proud of him. But knowing he's a part of it, and also that he's a grad of our program, that makes me feel good. I have complete trust in Lucasfilm now as far as what they're going to produce, and I hope that they're not making decisions based on financials or based on blowback from this crappy kind of toxic fandom that's built up around this, because I don't think those people are really truly fans of Star Wars. I think they're people who just would complain about anything. Like they would get online and complain about no matter what it was, find something negative about it. They're never going to be satisfied with anything new.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a critical opinion about something. It's another thing to troll people.
Oh, for sure.
It's horrible.
Yeah, and I saw again Ryan Johnson. He's been tweeting really funny stuff lately. And this guy, I can't remember what it was. He was referring somebody to something else, a filmmaking video and something, and somebody just replied to him and said, "Yeah, I guess after that Last Jedi disaster, you could use the help."
Yeah.
And he said, he said very nicely, I'm sorry that you didn't like it, but I'm trying not to inject negativity into these tweets, so I'm going to block you. And he explained it, and that was it. And he blocked the guy, but it was very well spoken. And yeah, these people who are just kind of jabbing out there for the sake of jabbing.
Yeah,
frustrating.
But the other thing is, you don't know. Like, we're at the point where it's like, is it a bot? Is it a kid?
It's people who are looking for attention.
Like if I knew somebody was like a 10-year-old kid,
I don't think 10-year-old kids have a problem with these movies.
And I'd be like, I would sort of be like, well, this is a stupid kid. But when you don't know, like, when you don't know who it is who's doing it, you're kind of like, well, why do I want to have an argument with a person I don't know?
I suspect that these people are, I'm just generalizing here, but I think they're probably closer to our age, but maybe fall somewhere in the middle with the generation that grew up with the prequels. I don't know. I shouldn't say that, but I think that they're definitely not 10-year-old kids, because those 10-year-old kids every 10-year-old kid I've met loves these films and loves everything they do. And the one thing I inadvertently tweeted out a spoiler about Solo, because someone I know went to see the film, and they said the row of 10-year-olds in front of me who were freaking out when it was revealed to be Darth Maul totally made it worth it. And that's exactly the kind of reaction you want from that moment, and from 10-year-olds, because they were the ones who watched Clone Wars and Rebels and know Darth Maul is still around, and they make that connection. That's for that audience. That's what that's for. It's not for the mainstream people.
Right.
If they'd made a Jabba, it would have made more sense to the mainstream audience, but it wouldn't have been as satisfying for us, for the people who've been following all the other stories.
That would have been more predictable.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, there's already kind of a reference to it in the film as well. So yeah,
exactly.
Anyway.
And I love a lot of those little references in Solo, and that's why I'm looking forward to watching it again to see what I might have missed.
We are gonna hopefully go to Celebration next year, and hopefully I'm gonna start bugging Pablo now about getting an interview with a live podcast from Celebration. But one thing I do want to ask him about that we didn't get to is the Star Wars Land and the Star Wars Hotel, which is opening next year. Now, we have, as a family, we were going to do Disneyland this year for a family vacation. We've decided to postpone that. And I've said because it's for financial reasons, because I don't want to drop another $7,000 on a Disney vacation. But really, it's because Star Wars Land opens next year.
Yeah.
So summer 2019, it's open in Disneyland. We're going to go to Disneyland for the first, probably not for the opening day or whatever, but certainly soon after. I'm going to try and get us a room at the hotel. I don't know if I can or not, but at least for a night. I'm sure it's going to be $1 million for one night, but just to experience it, I would love to do that. But we are going to go to Star Wars Land at Disneyland next year. This year, we're just going to go to the West Edmonton Mall.
That's great.
That's all good.
That's wonderful.
It's going to be fun. Keep it Canadian. We'll keep it Canadian for this year.
Let's see what the tariffs are like on Celebration.
That's right.
Before we decide to go.
Oh, that would break your boycott, wouldn't it?
Oh, I know. That's why I'm kind of like,
well,
hang on. But the Robert Mueller report is supposed to come out in September. So maybe he'll be forcibly removed by then.
There you go. Okay, we can hope.
Tomorrow's 4th of July. We probably shouldn't be pissing all over.
Hey, you know what? I had some really good conversations with Ambush Vin and with Pablo as well. Pablo talked about this a little bit during one of his panels. He said it's a scary time to be living there.
Yeah.
As a Canadian transplanted into this country, he sees stuff happening there, and he's like, that's the only reason he would ever consider moving back is because of the state of the country. And Ambush Vin had a very similar, like, he grew up there. He's born and raised in
Chicago.
No, just outside of Chicago, but yeah, in the Chicagoland area. But he was like, it's really scary when I know people. He's like, I've known a lot of people who've been deported. I'm like, that's crazy that you know people who've been deported. I don't know anybody who's been deported. It just doesn't happen as often here. But he's like, it is scary, but he's gonna obviously stick with it because he loves it there. But it's a weird time to be an American, and I think most Americans realize that. Even the ones who are pro-Trump feel that way.
Who would that be?
The ones who voted for him.
Half the country. Who are they?
Half the country almost. Anyway. What else? Anything else we want to talk about before we wrap up this episode? And by the way,
we'll save that for Media Nerds.
Well, I'm going to record a thing here for Media Nerds saying that we're going to be taking the summer out because I don't know what else there's to talk about.
There always is stuff.
Yeah, but because it's the summertime, it's going to be intermittent. We're not here every week.
We have to decide the frequency, maybe every couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, so we're going to do that. But anything else we want to talk about on the Star Wars Nerds?
Well, there's so much that we're going to be doing in the months ahead. Like, we need to do our commentary. We've stayed out of all of this infighting in the podcast the podcast infighting. We, that's been a big story in the last little while. Like, I listen to all the Star Wars podcasts, and they're all going at each other.
Really?
Yeah, it's something this is a long conversation, so we'll... all right. We'll table it for now, but I think it's something.
For myself, I don't usually listen to a lot of these podcasts, but for myself and for our listeners who want to kind of be informed on this, what should they listen to?
They're fighting. Rebel Force Radio is fighting now. This is podcasting, and I don't know. Like, basically, if you listen to both of them, like Rebel Force Radio in their last episode said, there are those who would take us down. And that's why we're asking you to be Patreon supporters. And it's ugly out there. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. It just sounds like, I don't know what happened. They're I don't know. They're accusing each other of trolling each other. Yeah, Okay. It's a long story. And I listen to all these podcasts and I don't really know what it's about.
And of course, we have the Making Star Wars / Steele Saunders group.
Yep.
Which is also
that's now This Is Podcasting.
Oh, is
that's
that
them. That's them. But Steele Saunders, I don't believe he was on that episode where they went.
So is that part of the Making Star Wars network? Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's so confusing.
I don't know. I don't know.
Should we be a part of a network? Should we do that?
Should we start a feud?
Yeah. Let's start a feud with Media Nerds. Those guys at Media Nerds podcast. Those jerks. Start a feud with ourselves.
But here's the thing. I think maybe we're older than your basic Star Wars fan, so we're not. We are
the same age as most Star Wars fans.
We were. I was definitely around at the very beginning, and so I don't know. I don't fight online with trolls. I just don't. I just mute them, or if they're a Russian bot, I'll say you're a Russian bot.
That's right.
Or something like that, and then right. Yeah.
I have a friend who goes by the name of Godless Mom at Godless Mom. Who's actually
I follow her. Yeah.
Of our podcast. I don't know if she listens to Star Wars Nerds, but she certainly listens to Media Nerds. But her online brand is all about atheism. She likes to promote atheism, and she spends a good portion of her time online arguing with people who believe in God. And she's arguing that there is no God. And I'm like, I don't even see that as why? You're beating your head against the wall. You're never going to convince them.
It's a hard day online every day.
Yeah, like you're just setting it. But that's she loves it. She absolutely loves it. She loves having these arguments. So more power to her. But I see that as the same argument against some of these Star Wars fans. Like, you're just never going to change their minds. So don't bother engaging.
Right. I don't mind weighing in on things, but it's like at a certain point, you don't like. There's a critical assessment, and then there's mudslinging. And there's a discussion is one thing, but just trolling people, nobody wants that.
No, well, the trolls do. The trolls still want that, but more normal people do not. I think it's going to do it.
Yeah, my meter's up soon.
Me too.
So
okay, we're going to get our tickets right away. But it's good to be back. That's going to do it for this episode of the Star Wars Nerds podcast. I'm Dan Vadabonker.
I'm Kenton Larson. Don't let the Force hit you in the ass.
TK-421, you copy? Now I am the master.
I'm taking an awful risk, Vader. This had better work.
Where did you dig up that old fossil? That's no moon.
Now I am the master.